This is Smarter San Diego TV.
Welcome to our very first edition of The Bigger Picture, where we discuss the big questions in life with a diverse group of guests. Today we are joined by Rabbi Josh Burrows.
I'm here to talk about the Jewish take on all these questions that Derek apparently has for us. I think it'll be exciting and fun.
Yoga instructor Heather Foat.
I am really excited to go beyond just surface level talk. I'm excited to see how this will all unfold today.
Psychiatry professor Tahir Bhatti.
We're going to talk about the big questions, right? So does God exist? Purpose of life, why we're here. I'm excited. I think it's going to be great.
And meditation coach Ayesha Suneja.
This is my favorite topic. Nobody ever really asks you, right? What do you believe about God and the purpose of life and why are we here? That's what I'm going to talk about.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Oh man, this is so exciting. Taking it to the next level here in Smarter San Diego TV, where we guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else. We do it all commercial free. The Bigger Picture, this is the first edition of The Bigger Picture, so we're going to tackle some of those questions that are a little bit above water cooler grade, if you will. So not about sports, not about traffic, but about the things in life that sometimes I feel like we don't talk about enough these days.
Holy water cooler?
Yeah. You're welcome. Good. Way to pitch in, Rabbi. Right? I appreciate that. So, I think the biggest question, and I see this happening personally right now a lot more people, a lot more atheists in the world now than there have ever been. That seems to be a growing population, a lot more agnostics. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of this. I'm just saying this is a fact of what's happening right now. A lot more people are questioning the potential reality or existence of God. So right off the bat, I think the biggest question out there, if you want to look at our existence, is God or no God? Tahir, what do you think?
This is what I have to say. I believe God is not a noun, but it's a verb. I believe God is an experience. And it could be God, Goddess, infinite spirit, universe, whatever word people use. But I also have to say that for my own life, is that beautiful sunset, it was amazing experience, this connected sense to whatever outside of you, someone else. To me, that's God. I think God's outside of you, I think God's inside of you, I think it exists all around us, but we're trying to get to that space where we're connecting on a deeper level. And to me, it's an experience, it's a verb. And God is not a noun, someone out there, it's something that you have, that you experience. And anybody can have that.
Interesting. So a total change in how you look at the word itself is what you're thinking.
Yeah.
It's an experience, it's a verb. It's not a person, a place, or a thing, but more a feeling or some sort of connection that you get.
Yeah.
Interesting perspective. Aisha, what do you think?
I agree. I really like the idea of the experience because no one can really tell you what God is or who God is. It has to be a personal experience. But back to your question, is there a God, is there not a God? I think there's a prerequisite to that question, and the prerequisite for me is who's asking? What part of you is asking? Because if it's your mind asking that question, I don't think you're ever going to get an answer that'll satisfy your mind, because your mind is meant to evaluate, it's meant to analyze, criticize, judge, condemn, or compliment, or praise. It's not wrong, it's its job. We call it dharma. Your dharma is what you are meant to do, what your purpose is. So the dharma of water is to be wet, and the dharma of your mind is to question and evaluate and analyze. So if you're asking the question from the mind, you're never going to get an answer to satisfy you. But if you ask from another part of you, if it's the soul asking, is there a God, then there is no more question, because you can't ask something that you already are.
Wow, that was a big twist. Oh my God. So let me try to interlude just to give you a little
I'm
break.
so glad I'm here for this. It's amazing.
You said water, the dharma of water is to be wet, which is an incredible thing all in itself. You take hydrogen and oxygen, two extremely dry things, and you add them together in a certain way, and all of a sudden you get wetness. And this is sort of back to the whole idea of, there is no duality, right? That's a whole nother question. There's no such thing as wet and dry. They're one and the same thing. They're just opposite sides of the same coin, like life and death.
Absolutely.
No such thing as the difference between the two. We should really just have one word for that, because right now you're living, but you're also dying. Right. And within life, within death, there's a lot of life. If you ever feared for your life before, if you've ever been face to face with a wild animal or something like that, and you felt that death was a possibility, you would be very alive right then, wouldn't you? So that's a really, really good point. I appreciate that. Josh?
Oh, thank you for that nice little segue. I definitely appreciate it. I mean, I think what makes that question so interesting is how much we focus on it. In a way, to me at least, although I do find the question extremely interesting, I find that question sort of secondarily interesting over what it is that we sort of do with our faith. It's one of those things where, whether or not a person believes in God or not, it almost is irrelevant. It's so not interesting because they either do or they don't. There isn't necessarily like a straight path to it. The more interesting thing for me is, well, you have these beliefs, well, what do you do with it? So for me, I find that the answer to that question is really yes and no. Is there a God of the Bible? Is there a God of literature? Is there a God that, exists in reality that's the same God that we've put into our literary sources? I personally don't believe in that God. But I do believe, and then the other question is, well, then what is God sort of in the minds of people? And you might say that, God is biography. Theology is always biography. So if you want to know what a person believes about God, you have to understand what their life story is, and that connects you and sort of your understanding of what they believe about God. Me personally, I do believe that there is a God and that God exists, and that the sort of entire universe in that way, all of existence, is a part of this single God, this oneness, this overall oneness that exists. And we are minuscule, tiny cells within that overall body. And that's what I personally believe that God is. But if you're saying, is there a God like
Man in the clouds with a harp?
Yeah, I don't believe in that particular God. However, if a person does believe in that particular God, I think it does behoove us to show them respect in the particular belief system that they choose.
So you're saying it matters much less what someone believes and much more what they do with their beliefs.
Yes, that to me is the way more interesting question. A person can believe or not believe. My question is, what are they going to do with it? What are they going to do with it?
It's a huge point that you make there,
Yeah.
Rabbi. You're going down the yogic direction, by the way. It's a good segue for Heather.
I know.
Because, like, the yogis, we have you guys like outnumbered today. But that's part of yoga, in a sense. The truth, is what really matters. And, if you two believe, you two say God and you two say no God, have you gotten any closer to truth?
Yeah.
Have you gotten any further away? Does the sun not fall on you now? And the reality is, it does. It's the same for all of us.
Yeah.
And you haven't gotten any closer to truth, and you haven't gotten any further away, and vice versa. So a very, very good point from the rabbi. Heather, are you ready to jump into this?
I am absolutely. I think this is wonderful. Prior to yoga, I was one that was always seeking God outside of myself. And I think through the practice of yoga, it's completely alternated that. My relationship with God and growing up was quite interesting because I went to church a lot. And then when my parents divorced, it became magnified just to help us through the process of going through that. And then as I would grow up and go into high school, my mom would have Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons come and sit with us on the couch to introduce us to other religions. And that just started to spark me to recognize that there is so much more out there as opposed to what I was being taught, which was, in my mind, a white man in the clouds that if it was raining outside, I thought he was crying, or if there was thunder, that he was like up there throwing thunder down because he was upset at people. That's the imagery that I had. And then in hearing other religions and then going off to college and learning women in religion, dating an atheist, my relationship has definitely gone through its ups and downs. And I think that as opposed to looking outside of myself, this practice has helped me to look within. And Dwayne Dyer, he was a teacher that I absolutely adored. And he's one that stated to have us look inside of ourselves to look for our own godlike qualities. And that's when it started to really shift for me.
It's very difficult to deny the fact that there is something divine in us, just based on the simple fact that, any one of us could eat a piece of bread right now, and by this afternoon our body would turn into a human being. So there's something inside of us, because that's an unconscious process. But if I could consciously look at a piece of bread in my hand and turn it into a human being, I would be God himself, right? but that's inside of all of us. So you can't really get around, no one could argue with you, I think, that if they just understood that basic fact that the Creator is inside in some fashion. But it does open up a whole nother conversation about, belief versus what you know. A lot of people choose to believe something. If you believe something, then you're essentially assuming, you're making some sort of assumption, or maybe a whole myriad of assumptions. If you know something, for example, then you're not making any assumptions, something that you know. So, and that goes to our second topic we'll get to in a second, but I want to go back to, so these beliefs, the stories you were told, when it rains outside, that's God crying. These are things that I think a lot of people have been told as you're growing up. The people telling you this didn't even believe it. So many things we were been told by people who didn't even believe the things they were telling us. We were made to believe. We were brought up to believe that this is the way it is, right? But we didn't really have any knowledge of this stuff. We just were told this is what's happening, and so we believed. It was a trustworthy source. Maybe it was someone, a member of the clergy, maybe it was our parents, maybe it was our grandparents, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny. There's other things too, okay? It's not just about religion or God, but those are the things that we were told, and so we chose to believe. And then the problem with believing is that when you make assumptions, that your body will, your physical body will not buy into it fully. It just won't. Your belief will only be acceptable to you as long as it's convenient for you. I see this all the time with people who say, I believe in predestiny, I believe in God, everything happens for a reason, but yet I wake up with nightmares and I'm frightened at night. Well, what are you frightened about? If you really believe that everything happens for a reason and it's all God's will, then so as long as it's convenient, you can believe. Is there a different way that maybe we should look at bringing these things up with the youths out there? Anybody want to jump in on that?
Sure.
Yeah,
we talk a lot about theology and about faith. And when I say theology, I mean the structured arguments, the descriptive words that we use when we talk about our particular belief in God. When we talk about faith, that's what we say when we usually mean belief. And while we tend to sort of understand what theology is and how it works, although I say theology is biography, I think we name faith incorrectly. I think we think about faith almost in scientific terms. Like, in other words, the purpose of belief is in thinking that something is true that doesn't seem possible to be true. And it's almost like you're thinking of it like a scientist. I can't prove it. I don't have evidence to prove my hypothesis, but I believe it, and therefore that's what faith is. And I'd like to say that that's not what faith is. I think faith is relationship. I think faith is the connection that we have. I'll never forget, I used to go to this synagogue in New York just before our high holidays, and the services were extremely early in the morning, and you had to really commit in order to be there. I'm talking 3 o'clock in the morning until 7, really serious. And there was a man there who never took part. He always went, but he never took part, an older guy. So one year, I finally kind of had enough gumption to talk to him, and I went up to him and I said, you come here every year, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. If you're not going to pray, why are you here? Out of curiosity and respect. And he rolled up his sleeve, and he showed me that tattoo on his arm, showing that he was, in fact, a Holocaust survivor. And he said to me that because God didn't do God's job in protecting him and his family during the Holocaust, he was going to show God that he didn't have to do his job and pray leading up to the high holidays. So this knocked me off my feet. I couldn't believe that a person would have that much
spite almost. Huh?
Spite, that's right, towards God. I mean, how irreverent can a human being be? And then I thought about it again, and I realized that this man had more faith in his pinky finger than I could ever hope to have, because he didn't even question whether or not God existed. He was just really mad. And there's something really holy and beautiful about that. So that's what I'd like to offer, that faith isn't belief in something that seems unbelievable. Let's forget that. Faith is your relationship with whatever it is that's larger than yourself, that wakes you up in the morning and gets you going.
Awesome story, Rabbi. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I just want to just add to that, is I do believe about that sense that, going back to the God question about faith, that it's about the belief you hold about yourself as well in a kind, loving way. So I always aspire for myself and for other people I work with, saying, I want them to live their best, highest, most loving, most authentic self. And as they do that, they're connecting, I think, to their higher self, their God self, that part of them that the picture's bigger than being in that space where we get caught up in the ego and into the anger or the fear. And all that's still part of it, still part of the equation of life. But I think we can aspire to be greater and grander and more loving, right? And that to me is kind of adding to that. Right? I love the story you say and saying that to me that's being connected. That's the relationship. And then it becomes outside of me, it becomes inside of me, it becomes everyone around me. Right?
Who's next?
Well,
Ayesha?
I'd like to add to that. My personal story is that I've been looking for God my whole life. And externally and internally, excuse me, and never ever understood why we couldn't see God. That was a question, even as a child, I thought, why can't we see God? If God is there and if you're so powerful, why won't you show yourself? And it took me a long time to realize that there's two things we can't see. One, we can't see God, and two, we can't see ourselves. I mean, I can't even look into my own eyes. I can look into a mirror and see a reflection of myself, but I cannot see myself. None of us can. So then what is that? Why is it that we cannot see God, and why can we not even look at our own face or look into our own eyes? If all the mirrors were taken away, we couldn't even see ourselves. And what I found was they're one and the same. There is no difference. If you're looking for God, you'll find yourself. If you're looking for yourself, you'll find God. I believe that you can't separate the two. So it's quite wonderful that you can't see God, because if we were able to see God or ourselves with the senses that we have in this limited capacity of the body, although it's brilliant and all that can do, our ego would step in and we would start to evaluate and criticize and separate. And because we can't separate, because we can't see God and we can't see ourselves, we can only have the potential to experience God and experience ourselves. And that's a whole different thing.
Bam. That's a mic drop moment right there, honestly. It really is. I mean, you described everything about yoga and union all in one. I mean, I was going to go to Heather. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did she steal your thunder?
Oh, no. No, I absolutely would love to piggyback on that, because I think that's my intention as an instructor of yoga, to help people see themselves, to help them embrace themselves and honor themselves, and as well see in the ways that they get in their own ways. I try to take my students on an experience every day, every week, to help them just recognize who they are and to embrace who they are, not by what the thoughts are creating, that neighborhood gossiper that exists in the mind that likes to criticize and judge and always have opinions. I want them to drop in and down to the whispers of their heart, because we can very much so get in our own ways, but by remembering our true nature, which essentially is joy and peaceful. That's what the practice of yoga is, to help a person to connect intimately to the core of themselves. And I think that we need those spaces throughout the day to check in and to stop movement, to stop life, so that we can go in within ourselves and see what's going on.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, yoga, union, connecting the inner and the outer so that there's just one, right? That's sort of the idea behind the definition of it. And I agree with you that in the practice of yoga and the physical postures and in the ethical practice, you can definitely learn something about yourself. No doubt about that. I think it's different for everybody, but there's something about it. There's something physical, because as you said, the mind, if you try to figure it out, Ayesha, if you try to figure it out in your mind, right, you'll find that it's so difficult, because the intellect's always cutting everything up. And even if you could see God, immediately you would judge it, just like you said. You would start cutting it up. In yoga, there's something about the body that's different, that's more reliable. And in doing the physical postures and doing the meditations, you can attach to that more reliable, more stable, more real element of divinity that is within the body, which we've already proven, right, earlier on in the discussion. So I do believe that we can talk about this all day. Did you want to add something else to that?
Yeah, I just want to, one of my favorite Indian proverbs states that within ourselves we have 4 rooms. We have the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual room within ourselves. And oftentimes we just hang out in one of those rooms. And through the practice of yoga or a walking meditation or anything it may be, but for myself I'll speak to yoga because it helps you to air out each of those rooms. It's a physical practice, emotional, spiritual, and whatnot. And when we're able to do that, I think we're able to feel more like a complete person. But I think that we kind of need to air out every single one of those rooms as opposed to hanging out in just one.
Yeah, or none. I mean, because it's frequently people are so busy they don't spend any time on themselves at all. And
There's autopilot.
Yeah, that's where I think yoga can really help people find them kind of detached from that. So I want to jump to our second topic, and Rabbi, I'm sure you get this question all the time, the purpose of life. This is one that will go on forever as a discussion topic, but I would love to hear the insights. We have such a brain, collection here that I like to tap into it. Purpose of life, someone comes up to you and asks you that.
My faith is sort of funny because Judaism isn't like other faiths that are very dogma sort of answer based. My faith is a lot more of a texture, I would say, than a dogma. It's more of an experience or a process than it is really anything else. And so on questions like this, what's sort of interesting is that for a rabbi, I find myself really embracing agnosticism on questions such as this. I mean, to be able to, would I really want to have the answer to such questions? I don't know if I'd really want to know the answer to such questions, but I can tell you that my faith will say it depends. It depends on who you are. It depends on what you believe is going to be a qualitative life. There are going to be as many different answers to that question as there are human beings. There's a saying, a sort of loose saying that we Jews have, where you say every 3 Jews there are 4 opinions, which on one hand is a very interesting psychological thing, because it might be saying that every 3 Jews, 1 out of 3 of us have multiple personalities, which is not the case. However, it's concerning. But what it does speak to, I think, that mindset is that we are really, truly encouraged to, like a fingerprint, have our own ideas, our own beliefs, and our own connection to God. Judaism doesn't offer clear answers really about anything. And so we have to sort of figure it out for yourselves. So what's the purpose of life? To try and figure it out, I think, is what the purpose of life is. What's the purpose of life? To answer that question. And it's going to be different every step of the way. My purpose in life now is a heck of a lot different with 2 beautiful daughters than it was prior. And I think that's how it goes.
Okay.
So,
Tahir, purpose of life from your perspective.
I love what the rabbi had to say, and just to add to that, I'll speak for myself, because that's all we can do is speak to myself. You're asking me that question, I can't speak for others. For me, it's about acceptance. There are 2 words, acceptance and surrender. Because I realize the purpose of my life is my life. It is when anything happens to me, good or bad, especially the bad, can I accept it and can I surrender? And in that moment, that becomes the purpose of my life. It's easy to accept the glorious things, the happy things, the things that are really lovely and exciting, but how hard is it to accept the challenging things, the horrific things, as you were saying in your story, the gentleman who was in the Holocaust? Can we accept it and surrender? In that moment, that becomes my purpose, and it's continual. It's second to second. It's my family, it's my work, it's my job, it's my health, it's my thoughts, my beliefs. That to me is the purpose of my life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Ayesha?
So again, I'll speak for myself as well. My purpose is, as a human being, I haven't lived very well as a human being most of my life. I've been living as a human doing. And I've been just doing and running and trying and achieving, and I've never really taken the time to just be and to appreciate how much potential there is in just being. So I'd like to start living as a human being. And that's my purpose.
Love it.
that's so clever.
Heather?
Yes, well, obviously I concur with what everyone has stated here. I remember going through a time where I was trying to figure some things out, and someone blessed me with just stating, "I wish you happiness and health." And that's all I needed to hear, and it was just so simple. If we could all just be happy and healthy. I think my purpose is to wake up happy, to try to understand with my own awareness if I am internalizing any suffering, and with that, trying to fall below it, or more so rise above it. So I'd love everyone to be happy and healthy.
This is amazing. We all have different answers for this. Imagine that. I think the purpose of life is to just be present. And that's the only thing we owe ourselves and everyone around us, is to just be right here, right now. And if we can do that and take action as it's needed, then everything will work itself out. And as far as the way that you feel and the way that you are, just be the way you want to be. Who's stopping you? And that's it for the bigger picture. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Stick around for more Smarter San Diego TV, where we guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else, commercial free.
You know our next guest as the champ.
There are certain things that can be a waste of money for sellers, and there are certain things that can really guarantee you a bang for your buck. So I'm going to be giving some tips and talking about some of my recent successes with renovating to sell.
Please welcome back real estate expert Elizabeth Story.
There she is.
Hi.
Champ, what's up?
Nice to see you.
How you doing?
Good.
Always in front of cameras, you and I speak. We need to go have coffee one of these days, just with no cameras around.
We'll make it a cocktail and you got a date.
Sold. All right. I have I think this is a really timely question right now, because we see there are a lot of agents in the marketplace who are going geographic centric. They're really trying to hammer home, I'm the neighborhood expert. You're a client centric agent, where you go wherever the clients need you to go. And recently I've been seeing that you are beating out these local guys who sold the house next door, and sometimes even for more than list price and stuff like that. And somehow you're getting the listings. And it's not because of a reduction in commission. You don't reduce your commission. You know what you're worth. So how in the world are you doing that?
Well, I like to say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So right now on the screen, there's going to be some before and after photos coming up. I specialize in fixing to sell. And when I say that, I mean it. I know what to fix and I know what not to fix, because the fact of the matter is that you do not get 100% return on your investment on certain types of repairs. Certain types of repairs could be a loss of money or even a complete waste of money. And then there's other repairs where you absolutely will get more than 100% return on your investment. And I've been doing it long enough with enough success that I have fine-tuned what is and is not worth your time. Another really big thing about fixing to sell is making sure that you have your team in place, because anyone who's ever done any kind of renovation knows that it can take a lot longer than you think and cost a lot more than you think. So if you've got a deadline that you're trying to hit, and if you're trying to get your house on the market by a certain time, you need reliable people who can get in and get out for the price they said they would do it, as quickly as they said they would do it. It's taken me years to get people who can do those things, but now I have a team in place where I can have a property from the time that I sign a listing agreement to the time it hits the market. Sometimes a complete renovation like the one that we just did in La Mesa in under 30 days. We had that done in 3 weeks, and we completely changed the home, and it looks fantastic.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's something that a lot of people could probably learn from, because I know most home sellers, I talk to them every day, just doing casting calls for Win This Listing, which you've been a cast member of multiple times now, and you'll continue to be. But when I talk to them, a lot of times they say, well, we have these things we want to fix first before we have you guys come and film the property. And I always try to say, don't touch a thing, because you don't know what you're doing. You might think it's worth it to put all this money in the floor, but the floor may not be where that you're going to get a return on your investment. In fact, you might put a floor in and the buyer doesn't even like your floor.
Right.
Doesn't want your floor.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that I think people, they're making repairs for themselves, but they're not the ones who are buying the house.
Right.
And so I think there's a big disconnect between the average homeowner who's preparing their home for sale and the buyers who are going to be coming in and looking at it.
Exactly.
So you must have to have a lot of conversations around that with people who have in their head, all right, these are the things we need to fix.
Right. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times, for example, I've seen a listing where it has new carpet. Carpet's like not that great, and not everyone's looking for carpet. And when you put in the cheapest carpet that the money can buy with zero pad and it feels like you're walking on concrete, well, it's kind of a waste of money. So again, like you said, flooring is, you got to make sure you're doing the right kind of flooring, the current kind of flooring. Trends tend to change throughout the years, and you can kind of tell sometimes when a house was last updated by what trend they were following. And neutral tones are very in right now, and people don't like a lot of really dark colors right now. That's what seems to be popular. So you want to make sure you're doing something that appeals to a broad variety of buyers in today's market. Another thing that I do is I work with a really expert stager. I mean, she's just so good at what she does, and people tend to forget that staging can really make your home seem like it's worth more money. And so you might think that your old puffy couch looks great in the corner and it's really comfortable, but like, for example, my stager points out, puffy furniture doesn't photograph well. It just looks sloppy. So we're gonna take that couch in, put something smaller, makes the room look bigger. So it's really a fine art that gets honed and fine-tuned over time. And it's important that if you're fixing to sell or selling for top dollar, that you work with an agent who not only says they know what they're doing, but can show you before and after photos and has a track record of success to actually prove that they know what they're doing and that all the advice that they're giving you is the right advice.
Sort of like the photos you've been watching throughout this segment of the before and afters of what Elizabeth has been able to accomplish with these homes. Now, what about budget-wise and things like that for people out there who might be looking to sell, but I have a micro budget, or maybe I have almost no budget for stuff. Is it necessary to always do these repairs, or is it just something where you can kind of make a micro investment into your macro investment of the house?
Yeah, so that's going to be a really subjective question, and I know I give you that answer a lot, but real estate's really personal, and what works for one seller isn't going to work for another seller. I have 3 listings hitting the market today. They're all completely different. One of them I said, just clean and declutter. We're not going to do anything else, because their specific situation, they just did not have the budget. And I knew that, again, flooring would be subjective, so I didn't want them to spend thousands of dollars changing that particular floor, knowing that the buyer might not like it or might want to change it anyway. So that seller, we are just cleaning and did mild staging, and it's ready for photos. Another client, our budget was about 10 grand. We put it all on the credit cards because we were doing it fast enough that they could get their rewards and get their points. And the plan is to have that home closed in under 30 days. So they only have to carry that balance on their credit cards for under 60 days, get very, very little interest. And I guarantee them that they will get more than a $10,000 return on their investment. So there's something that works right for every client, but it is going to be a recipe that fits for each particular person.
But not necessarily do you have to have tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Because I think sometimes people hear the word remodel or rehab,
Yeah.
and they think like 60 grand, 80 grand, blowing out, kitchens and things like that.
no.
But what you're talking about is making wise investments.
Right.
Not doing that. In fact, doing the opposite of that. So a lot of people will do that. They'll spend $40,000 on the kitchen and the floors, and before you know it, and it's like, this money just went into this hole, and is it ever going to come out?
Right.
Might not.
Right. And that depends on the price you got the house for, too.
True.
What did you get the house for? How long have you owned it? What kind of equity do you have in it? And again, it always goes back to return on investment. If you're putting 20 grand in, is it going to be 20 grand back out? And so, it's different. It's not going to be the same for a $250,000 condo downtown as it would for a $2.5 million house in Rancho Santa Fe. Right? They're just not the same. So each one, again, is going to be specific, but just painting alone can make such a huge difference. And I can get that inside of a house, most houses painted for under 3 grand, and I have a painting team that can come in and out in a day. So if 3 grand's like the max that you can even work with, then we can change your house overnight. It's that easy.
Not to mention the way it looks, but also the way that it smells, and therefore the way that it feels. It
Right.
smells and feels new when you hear that, when you have that paint smell.
Right.
One thing I would highly encourage everyone to do before you go and spend money on investing into your property that you're planning on selling, call Elizabeth, ask her, pick her brain, have her come look at the home. She'll tell you what you should and should not spend money on. You're probably throwing money away, I'm telling you right now. If you're making this assessment on your own without the knowledge of the market and the area and what buyers are looking for, you are definitely throwing money away somewhere. It's just a matter of where you're throwing it away. So you might get lucky and get one or two things right, but you're probably throwing money away. And there's no real need to do that. I mean, especially if you have money to invest, you can invest it very wisely, get your home ready for sale, not only for a higher price, but probably at a shorter time frame too.
Shorter time frame. That was one thing I was going to mention. Every month that goes by, you're making mortgage, maybe you're making HOA, you're making taxes. If it's vacant, for example, that's just money going in a hole. If you're living in it, well, you can kind of negotiate that, it's still the cost of living, but time. You need, again, it goes back to a team that can come in and out quickly. And if you're fiddling around with it for 6 months, how long do you really want this to take? So call an expert that has a team that can get it done fast.
Yeah, and it's really crucial to have all those team members on hand, as I know one of the listings you got recently from a local area expert was simply because you had a bigger Rolodex, which apparently is a big deal. I mean, for people who are willing and ready to make some improvements to the home.
Right.
They want to know that you've got all the people in place, which you obviously do.
Right then, right there.
Boom. Great stuff. Elizabeth Story, thank you so much for your time. Great to see you
Appreciate
again. Stick around for more Smarter San Diego TV, where we guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else. Commercial free.
Welcome to the Real Estate Debate, where we debate the hottest topics in San Diego real estate. Let's meet today's panelists. Guest number 1, Steve Ploetz, realtor at Century 21.
Yes, sometimes it does make sense to pay over the appraised value. The appraisal is simply an opinion, and sometimes the opinion that comes from the appraiser isn't accurate for market value.
Guest number 2, Elizabeth Story, owner for Story Estates.
I think it's best to sell when it's right for you and your particular home. And real estate is cyclical to a degree, but there is no right or wrong time to sell if it's right for you and for your life, and you have a good agent to do it for you.
Guest number 3, Dan Heilbrun, broker for Harcourts Esquire.
You only need one buyer. You need one seller, one buyer. Typically those seasons have a great demand. So, I say either or. There's no bright line rule.
And guest number 4, AJ Powers, broker owner for Powers Premier.
I definitely think there are times where you should pay above appraised value on a home. If the market's increasing and there's a time where you can get in, even if it's a little bit over the appraised value, you're going to start building equity sooner than later and you're going to miss out on a property that's appreciating.
All right, welcome to the Real Estate Debate. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your time. This is everyone's first time on the Real Estate Debate for TV, right?
That's correct.
That's right?
Correct for me.
Now, Elizabeth has a little bit of experience with the old Real Estate Debate on radio, where she is the champ of all time. So not that you guys should be intimidated. We don't crown anyone anymore because she was just beating everybody and it got old for everyone, including her. So now we have a much more chill atmosphere for our Real Estate Debate. Of course, today we're debating the hottest topics in San Diego real estate. One is about buying, one is about selling. Let's jump right into the action. Topic number 1. I've actually heard people, home sellers, say this or something to this extent. If you're trying to sell a home for top dollar, it's best to list in the springtime, take advantage of the hot summer season. After that, things slow down and sellers don't have as much luck. We're talking about timing the market. Do you agree with that statement or do you disagree, Steve Ploetz?
No, I disagree with that statement. And I'll tell you why. It depends on the type of house. Some houses, yes, it's important that the demographic as to who's going to buy that house is going to be a family. So therefore, it's important to them that they purchase during the summer season when the kids are out of school. However, there are a lot of other demographics of buyers and investors and clients that are relocating. I think it's a terrible idea in order to wait. I mean, certainly there are pros and cons to all issues, but in San Diego, because of the weather and because of the ability that buyers can relocate, and Qualcomm and the Navy and everybody's bringing in people at all times of the year, if you go on the market in the wintertime, you're going to be just as competitive as during the summer.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
For the most part, I agree with you. You look at buyer behavior and you think about in the summertime or spring and summertime, you have a longer time to look at a house. The sun is out longer. People are out for summer program, their summer program. There's a lot of buyers that flood the market, but at the same time, if it was canon that everybody would sell a house, between May 1st and May 15th, then it would flood the market with inventory, and obviously that would be a terrible time to do it as well. In my experience, summer has been a good time to sell. Right now, I feel it's slowing down, but I think it's going to pick it up before the wintertime. And wintertime is not necessarily a great time to do it because people are thinking about Christmas and Thanksgiving. So for the most part, San Diego's got a wide open summer season, which is a great time to sell. But like again, like you said, it's not canon. It's not, it's an idea. It's what people like to come to a conclusion. But again, San Diego's got a wide open selling season.
Okay. AJ?
I also disagree to an extent. Right now, our inventory is extremely low, and real estate is supply and demand. So if you're looking historically, like last year, we had about 8,000 sales first quarter, 10 or 11 second, 10 or 11 third, and then the fourth was about 8 or 9. But the new listings to sales was about equal. So we're having the same amount of properties coming on the market as selling. So to me, the demand is there, the rates are great, you have plenty of incentive. Plus, I think we're getting to a point where we're going to start plateauing in prices. So don't wait till next spring. Do it now because you know the numbers are good. And if there's less people on the market, that means you have an asset that's going to be more of a demand as opposed to being out there with 10 or 11,000 active listings. You're going to be one of 7,000. So there's pros and cons to it, but I think don't wait.
Okay. Elizabeth?
I disagree 100%.
Sure?
Yeah, it's just poppycock to scare people into listing at a certain time, and it's not true. And I'll give you a very specific example. I hold the highest price per square foot in Treo, and I listed it in December, and we closed in January with 3 holidays. So every property is different, every buyer is different, kind of like he said. A high-rise doesn't sell to the same client or during the same time as a house right next to the elementary school. Maybe it was a buyer just like mine who was coming from overseas and they just wanted to come during the winter because the winter weather is better in San Diego. So if you want to sell, it really just comes down to a personal decision about what's best for you at that time. People get divorced, they change jobs, they move, they get transferred.
And Trail that's a high-rise in downtown.
Correct.
That you listed in December, sold in January. Did anyone look up where the highest average, what month has the highest average price per square foot in San Diego County?
No,
Can we guess? Because right?
I believe it's July.
I think July.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was looking at some of the numbers today, and I think it's pretty close to July.
Yeah, it's later in the year.
September.
It's September or October. I can't remember, one of the two. But which kind of makes sense because that's when these things are closing, and they're probably getting into escrow. Late summer, things like that. But in some areas, look up some zip codes. This is a really interesting stat to show your sellers. Look up some zip codes, and a lot of them that we've looked up, it's October, it's November sometimes where the highest price per square foot is. And that is a result of, I think, just lack of inventory, because a lot of those home sellers also come off the market, in the summertime if they don't sell their home or if they just can't get it together quick enough, they decide they're going to stay one more year, whatever it may be. So there's less inventory. And that can drive, in some areas, higher price per square foot. So I actually agree with all of you all and completely disagree with this, which is a common understanding out there in the marketplace for home sellers that you want to sell in the summer, you want to sell in the summer, you want to sell in the summer. And while there's more transactions taking place, there's more volume, you're not necessarily getting the most money for your property.
Right.
So
especially in San Diego, because we don't have snow. So
Right.
we're not shoveling any driveways when we're selling in December.
Right.
So
Can you imagine if that were the case?
I would not be doing
These
real
poor
estate.
These poor agents in like Michigan and
Iowa.
Hold on, I got this.
That's why you do loans.
It's already hard enough to find a lockbox now.
All right, let's jump into topic number 2. This is for buyers. This one has come up a lot in recent times, and I know, Dan, you mentioned earlier things had slowed down recently a little bit. We've seen homes staying on the market a little bit longer, still really, really much a seller's market, but slowing down as in homes aren't selling in a week, they're selling in a month. Topic 2, agree or disagree. Elizabeth, we'll start with you. As a buyer, you should never pay above appraised value for a home, even if it's your dream home, because that is a recipe for long-term disaster.
I disagree, and I will give you 3 specific examples. I sold a property on Highland Drive in Carlsbad. It was under contract for $1,075,000, and we had 2 backup offers. The appraisal came back at $975,000. We were in an inclining market. The most important thing I have to say about paying for over appraised value is inclining market. If you're in an inclining market and you know how competitive it is, you might have looked at 30 homes to find your dream home, and if you pass up on it, it might be another 6 to 9 months before you find another dream home. Meanwhile, all the prices are going up. So you need to make a decision right then and there. If you're in an inclining market and it's just a small difference in appraised price, you could actually be making financial gain by paying over. Again, that property was under contract for $1,075,000. It appraised for $975,000. Today, it's worth $1.6 million. It was not a bad financial decision for that buyer to come up with the difference. I'll give you a second example in Encinitas. I had these clients who were looking. They really couldn't afford much. They finally found a property they could afford. It didn't appraise by $15,000. They let it go. Today, it's worth $50,000 more than what they let it go for. So again, it's always super, super subjective. It's super personal. In a declining market, I would never even consider paying more than appraised value. But in an inclining market, it's definitely something that you might want to consider doing if it's the right property.
Take a look at it.
And if you're going to be in it for a long time. Because it also matters how long you're going to be in the home.
Yeah, totally agree there. AJ, what do you think about that?
I agree with a lot of what you said, but do disagree with in the declining, never paying over. There's many times where an appraiser who is a third party comes in with a difference in value because they don't necessarily understand the market, whether it be a local area or what's going on. They're not selling homes, they're just going out and looking at numbers, so they may not understand this is a really limited asset. I'll give you an example. I have clients that are in contract on a property that's new construction in Spring Valley. Very, very little new construction in Spring Valley. So we had one other comp that's in contract that hasn't closed, but it appraised for $40,000 over what we're in contract for. Our appraisal came in $40,000 under ours. So they don't necessarily see what we're seeing. So when I went through, we was VA, luckily we did a Tidewater. So I showed them, I pulled the whole zip code. There was one other active. It was 100,000 more. If you want this type of inventory, this type of home, it doesn't exist. So we have to pay a little bit extra, maybe in the appraiser's eyes, to get that asset because there isn't anything like it. Another example would be actually the clients that are purchasing that home. They bought a home for $400,000 in 2013. It appraised at $390,000 and we paid $10,000 over. This was like one of the hottest times in the market too, where every single property had 5 or 6 offers. So they ended up paying $10,000 over for the appraised value. Well, we're in contract today at $495,000 and they didn't put a single dollar in that home. So in 3 years it appreciated 25%, even though they only put $10,000 over. It was a smart investment and it made sense at the time. So I think it depends on what you're looking at. Timing definitely makes sense, and I agree how long you're staying there. I mean, if rates are really, really good today, pay a little bit more, because if you wait 6 months and it goes up 0.5%, even if the price goes down, you're going to be stuck in that higher interest rate, and payment's probably going to be a little bit higher even if you get a better price.
Okay, yeah, definitely something to look at the math on what that might look like. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, and speaking of the math, so I love your answers, they're great. You never want to speak in absolutes. Saying never and never is never a good idea. And it's always, it depends. I mean, one of the reasons why you don't want to do this, why you don't want to pay more than the appraised value, is because it can affect your financing. Because you might not have to spend that much money or you have to spend more money to buy a house over appraised value. It might affect your down payment. So it depends on that person's financial situation. And what you guys are saying is absolutely correct, especially in an inclining market. If that's what it takes to get that property, you got to get in it. I bought a property or helped somebody buy a property in 2012, and they sold it in 2014 for $200,000 more. Would it be worth it for them to have paid $5,000 more? Absolutely. And sometimes, you find that house that you want, you have to, do what you can to get it. But again, it depends. It depends on the person's financial situation. Everybody's different. But it's also an interesting thing. If a house does appraise for under what you've offered, then you have an opportunity to negotiate. So it gives you that, because you have an out in your contract. If it doesn't come in at appraised value, you could actually go back to the seller and have this happen. So it might be a good idea as far as renegotiation. So, and another thing, what you said that I'd like to reiterate: sometimes the comps just aren't there.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not close enough, and you have to guess. And with this market right now, sometimes you'll find a house for 1,700 square feet that is appraising or selling for $450, and something 500 square feet less that has appraised or comes in with comps like 30,000 under. It's just it's an awkward market, and you have to go and get what you want.
Steve, what do you think?
Well, a realtor is coming to an agreement on something, and I love it. I think that, to reiterate what they're saying, is an appraisal is an educated opinion of value. We have educated opinions of value, and buyers will have educated opinions of value. You do 3 different appraisals, you'll get 3 different numbers sometimes. I think the thing to recognize is that value is very tricky and very difficult to put an exact on for a house. What's the value of the 22nd floor versus the 14th floor? What's the value of granite countertops? What's the value of this view? Appraisers have algorithms, and they work within a confined restrictions of trying to figure out, well, I need 3 comps, and this one has a view, so my algorithm says that the view is worth $10,000. When in actuality, a view may be worth a lot more to a specific buyer, because residential real estate is bought and sold on emotion. Maybe there's somebody, we represent a buyer, and that buyer, all they want is a freaking view. Maybe we represent Scrooge McDuck, and he really wants the giant tomb that he can jump into with. I mean, all that stuff is really important to people. So I'm just saying that to an appraiser who's looking at numbers and trying to figure out and calculate it all, oftentimes it's very difficult. We've all given some examples. I'll give one very simple example. I represented a buyer this year where a property appraised low. It appraised so low that we were concerned that the whole deal wasn't going to work out. We tried to renegotiate with the seller. It was far too low. The buyer decided to change lenders and order a new appraisal. 10 days later, we got a new appraisal at a $60,000 difference. These are qualified, licensed appraisers giving their opinion of value, but it's still an opinion. So I think that in certain cases, it certainly makes sense in order to pay over I mean, depending on numbers. At the same time, I will say, it's important for a buyer to recognize that the easiest way that they can protect themselves, Elizabeth talked about an inclining or a declining market. What are we in now? Sometimes it's hard to tell. Seems like it's an inclining market, but there is always speculation of, well, are things turning? Are we propped up? The biggest way that you can protect yourself is not paying over the appraised value up front.
Okay, yeah, and it's a very good question and a great segue into what I want to discuss next, because you're right, it's always an inclining market until it isn't anymore. And when that is, who knows? But that's what I think is kind of on the table right now. I mean, are we seeing a cyclical slowdown at this point in time? It seems like activity slowed a little bit. It's still well within the seller's market, range, but this is what it would look like if it were going to go off the deep end. It would start like this, wouldn't it? So a lot of people out there are starting to go, oh, it's getting slow. Oh, I missed my best chance to sell, or whatever it may be. Anyone have an opinion on current state?
If it's all right, I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
I heard you were jumping ready. I'll be quick. I think you have to look at the economic factors. Previously, we had economic factors that led to a change. Big Short or all the inventory that flooded the market. We need to look at what are the reasons that we would see an influx of inventory. What would be the reasons we would see a change? In my opinion, there's only a couple. One is the election. No matter who gets elected, everybody is going to have kind of a wait-and-see attitude. It's unfair for me to say everybody, but the majority of consumers kind of have a, what's going to change? And how am I going to react to this? Let me wait and see what happens. So I think that'll impact some things. Our national debt, still in the trillions. And student loan debt, to me, is the next big thing for the millennials, for people that are coming up through jobs where they have to continually deal with those items. I think that the next presidential candidate is going to have to compete with a lot of those things and figuring out solutions to those. Otherwise, the inventory is far too low. There's not going to be enough inventory that's going to come on the market that's going to make a change.
Okay.
Take it away.
Yeah.
Buyer behavior, you have to look at buyer behavior, and right now people are going back to school. Like you were saying, house prices could be really high in November. I think we'll get another flush of activity before the end of the year. But you're right. You have to look at economic factors. You have to look at regulatory factors. We still have a harshly regulated mortgage regulatory system right now. They haven't let up on this. When it comes down to mortgages as well, interest rates could go up. They could go down. We don't know how much our economy is actually propped up right now. Also, I think you'd look at the behavior of the new builds. I live in Carlsbad, and there are just places ready to go up. It looks like E.T., when they're riding their bikes to the neighborhoods, and there's just a neighborhood after neighborhood coming up. That it's happening in Leucadia, it's happening in Carlsbad, it's happening in Oceanside. So that would help out the inventory. So it's kind of a wait and see attitude, and you don't really know what's going to happen after the election. People will start changing their minds about things. The feds might change their mind about interest rates. So it's a wait and see attitude. Obviously, we have seen a lot of appreciation in the past 4 years. So we do have to be trepidatious of whether or not this is going to continue. So we'll wait and see.
Wait and see. AJ, what do you think? market in general?
I don't think we're at the end, but I think we're getting close as far as appreciation, seeing some kind of shift. I think if you're looking at numbers, we're going to sell less homes if we stay on track this year than any year the last 4 years. Even though the values are higher, we're still seeing less inventory and less sales. But you're still seeing our days on market is shorter than any of the 4 years averaged out. And I think as long as rates stay under 5%, we're going to see people continuing to buy. Whether or not we see more inventory or we see a shift in how long it's taking to sell them, who knows? But I think it comes down to affordability, which I think we're almost capped out, where anyone that makes less than $100,000 can't buy a home at this point. So at what point can we get higher and higher and higher and still have enough demand that those homes are going to sell for what they're selling for now or even more? So I think rates, I definitely agree election, but I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as we're thinking it's going to be. So rates, I think number one, that's going to drive the market more than anything else. If we get up into the 5 or 6%, which is still historically great, but people are going to get scared away and it's going to change what they can afford, and obviously that's going to change how much homes are selling for.
Elizabeth, I know you have an opinion on this.
Yes. I have an opinion on everything.
Tell me.
It's kind of a summary of what they said, and I want to kind of tie it up with a little cross-referencing points. A couple things that I want to make sure I talk about. Hyper-local. We're in San Diego. It's hyper-local. We're near the water. They don't build more water, so we're always going to have a higher demand in San Diego than some other parts of the country. And also hyper-local. He brought up Carlsbad, for an example. Carlsbad, old Carlsbad, 92008 specifically, in 2011 when it was about the bottom of the dip, they rebounded faster than almost any other zip in the county of San Diego. Well, last year they started taking a little dive. Properties started sitting on the market a little bit longer and they started having a lot of trouble because of all that new construction that you're talking about. So that specific market is going to be independent of other economic factors because it's an inventory, it's a supply, it's a demand issue. But going back to what I've been seeing ever since that 2011 kind of bottoming out is those lending regulations that did change. It's good for all of us because people who are buying properties are well qualified. They have skin in the game. I'm still seeing cash buyers, large down payments. People who put a large down payment into their home, people who buy it for cash, they're going to hold on to it. The crash that happened, this last crash, we have to remember why it happened. It happened because of bad lending. People who had no skin in the game, and a lot of people who are walking away from nothing anyway. They were walking away from bad debt they never should have been in. So as long as we keep seeing these stable buyers, these qualified buyers, I'm hoping that we'll have neighborhood stability. That being said, I do expect, in the next year to start seeing a little more plateauing because the fact of the matter is we just can't keep up at this pace. You have to be, you have to be a six-figure earner to be able to afford a home in San Diego, and at some point that's going to have to level out.
Yeah.
I'm also kind of curious to see what water, wildfire, and infrastructure is going to do because people are moving here. Something like 70,000 college degrees moved to San Diego just last year. Money is moving out of San Francisco because it's too expensive up there. It's expensive in LA. So I'm seeing a massive population spike here. So, but you're talking about microclimates. I always think about that. What's the price of a house that's going to be near a wildfire? Do we have the water to put it out? Do we have the water to remain the infrastructure here? And I drive to Kearney Mesa every day, so I go down the 5. We need to widen that road. Mm-hmm. If we keep on building, what's going to happen to the traffic?
Exactly.
Traffic's going to get worse. It's going to be like LA. Great stuff, though.
Thank
you all.
I think it's happening. It's on its way.
It's on its way. Thank you guys so much. Great insight today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Tune in next month, same time, same channel, for more real estate debate where we debate the hottest topics in San Diego real estate and guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else. We'll see you then. Hey, great show, guys. That's a wrap. Jade, what's your schedule look like? Do you mind breaking down the set?
Not today, Derek. I'd love to, but there's waves out there. I gotta go.
No, I can't either. I'm starting to get hangry and I have way too much stuff to do today. Kudu, you've got this, right?
Sure, guys. I would love to. I'll get right to work.